Hello and what is up YouTube? My name is G3Iron and today we are taking a look at the Path of Exile Harvest FAQ. I'm sure we've all had questions about the upcoming 3.11 Harvest League, and Grinding Gear Games has been nice enough to give us an FAQ very early on in the hype cycle of Harvest. So let's dive right into this particular announcement and teaser and FAQ. Earlier this week, we announced Path of Exile Harvest, which is set to launch on June 19th. In this league, you'll assist Oshabi as she explores the mysterious powers of the Sacred Grove. In short, you'll plant seeds, encourage their growth, harvest the monsters within, and use their life force as a powerful crafting source. In Harvest, you'll be able to find a seed cache in each area. When you're within a certain range of it, roots will appear beneath your feet and point you toward it to help you easily locate it. Open the cache, collect the seeds, and enter Oshabi's portal to plant them in the garden alongside collectors. Each seed has a different property which dictates which monster will spawn from it and which specific crafting resources that monster can create. Once a crop of plants is fully grown, you can harvest it and monsters will emerge. If you are able to slay these monsters, their life force can be used for crafting and to help grow higher tiers of seed. The Sacred Grove gives you complete power over which seeds you'd like to plant, how many monsters you'd like to challenge yourself against at any one time, and which crafting options you'd like to utilize. The crafting options provide benefits to characters at all levels and unlock means of power not seen before in Path of Exile. We're really excited about introducing a league with a pace that differs from previous leagues and can't wait to see how players build their characters around these new crafting options. Do seeds stack? The answer, yes. Identical seeds of the same level will stack in your inventory and in the seed storage within the grove. The level will be displayed on the seed in your inventory. How do I make my plants grow? Seeds specify how many cycles of growth they require before they'll be ready to harvest. When you open a seed cache in the main game, it will count as one growth cycle within your garden. You don't need to enter your garden in order to make the seeds grow, and their growth is not tied to the passage of time. This means that players for sure who are already Zoomy players and going through content are definitely going to figure out a way to just click through and encounter cycles, or rather speed up the growth cycle in their garden, whereas other players who don't necessarily want to speed through it don't have to. So that's a very interesting choice for the activation, or rather the growth cycle choice of mechanic. That's very interesting. What happens if I don't plant my seeds? Will they disappear? You can save them for as long as you'd like, or even trade them to other players. Do I have to harvest my plants within a certain amount of time? No, they don't wither or die. If I don't feel like tending my garden, what happens if I skip entering the garden for a map? This has no negative effects on your garden, it just pauses your progress. You can leave it for as long as you'd like and return to it when you're ready. How do I get garden equipment? You start with a small amount of each type of equipment to facilitate getting your garden started. Some is already placed in your garden to ensure that it's easy to learn how things work as you progress throughout the game. It's likely that you can use Life Force to purchase additional pieces of infrastructure. I really like this. This is GGG actually going the way of maybe offering some tutorial for players by actually kind of setting up the garden, or at least allowing some structures to be present in the garden when we first visit it. I like that. That's great. That's going to help a lot of new players, which all of us are new players to this league, but especially it's going to help a lot of new players who aren't necessarily going to access all the various means of information about learning about their garden. It's going to be very helpful for those players who just play Path of Exile, in full screen mode and don't ever look at forums or read YouTube or look at Reddit. Anybody who's just playing the game to try to learn how to play the game, that should help an immense amount. Can I accidentally target my garden's infrastructure while I'm fighting monsters? You have a short window to activate as many collectors as you'd like. After this window, you can't target anything else in your garden while monsters are alive. The exception to this is the portal to exit your garden in case you need to quickly flee the danger. This is one aspect where I have very much enjoyed the quality of life that Grinding Gear Games has added to Delirium as the Delirium League has grown and time has gone on. The fact that you can end a Delirium encounter whenever it is that you'd like, similar to a Blight encounter, that's very, very big. And hopefully there will be some sort of timer that gives slow builds or slow characters enough time to maneuver throughout the garden to activate as many collectors as somebody would generally like. And then hopefully for faster characters, that timer is optional. So that way, if a player wanted to go zoom across the garden and simply open up a ton of collectors, they have enough time to do so. But rather, if somebody just wants to open one collector and doesn't want to wait some lengthy enforced period of time, they can then click some sort of speed up mechanism. I think that would be absolutely wonderful. Will we be able to move or delete garden infrastructure if we'd like to change their placement? Yep. Can I access the Sacred Grove from my hideout? Yes. How many new crafting options does Harvest introduce? There are over 45 crafting categories, resulting in over 250 different possible craft effects. Now this, I would just like to have a point of comparison. Inside Delirium, for those of you either who are new or returning veterans from Delirium League, Delirium gave us over 280 notables to play around with on the passive tree through cluster jewels. And so here inside this league, we're getting over 250 different possible craft effects. So expect there to be roughly some amount of crafting effects that you just look at and you go, meh, that's not that interesting. And that's true with cluster jewels. And then there's also going to be some things that you look at and you go, wow, that's amazing. I can't wait to craft that or build around that, similar to cluster jewels as well. GGG does a great job when they've got a wide spectrum of various mechanics that they're introducing, or one particular mechanic with a wide spectrum of variety inside that mechanic that they're releasing. And they're certainly doing that for Harvest crafting. Hopefully my and many other initial impressions on crafting just from the trailer will be absolutely wrong, and hopefully the crafting is going to be as broken as GGG is absolutely saying, and hopefully those of us who have been naysaying it are going to be proven wrong. I like being wrong. I mean, I married my wife and she tells me I'm wrong all the time, so I kind of like it. How do I know which crafting options I'll get? Each seed states which category of crafting benefits it most, so that you can prioritize planting seeds which correlate to which crafting options you're interested in. When you slay the monsters from those seeds, their life force can be used to craft an outcome within that category. The specific outcomes you received are listed on the crafting screen. The more life force you have in your collector from this fight, the more options you'll be able to use out of the set that you've received. For example, if you plant 8 seeds that grant reveals a random physical modifier crafting effect when harvested, slay those monsters and gather their life force, you'll be presented with different options with outcomes like reforge a rare item with new random modifiers, including a physical modifier, augment a magic or rare item with a new physical modifier, remove a physical modifier from an item, or randomize the numeric values of the random properties of physical modifiers on the item. Those are all pretty dang good. This is essentially taking nearly all of the type of crafting currency that we do have and then making it targetable or making it more specific. So a lot of the RNG that you would have with classic basic crafting that we've got, at least up until now in Path of Exile, is pretty randomized, right? It's pretty randomized based on the amount of affixes that are in the pool and the base that you're interacting with. So being able to target specific outcomes is a very, very powerful thing that generally we only have access to through our crafting benches or through some very specific prophecies. Path of Exile crafting in general is about reducing your RNG, and so if this is where the power of crafting is coming into Harvest, then yes, this is going to be a ridiculously powerful crafting league where we can reduce a lot of RNG. Continuing on with the answer, you may have multiple uses of some of these based on the randomly determined outcome of each seed. There will be a total of 8 outcomes, including the multiple uses, though you'll usually not have enough life force to use them all, but you'll hopefully get and be able to afford the one that you really wanted. Does Harvest crafting also benefit low-level players? Yes. Tending your garden from the earliest stages of the game provides powerful benefits to both leveling and endgame characters. We want the items you craft to be very powerful and to provide a huge boost for getting through the storyline content. For example, Exalted Orbs are powerful currency items that are generally only available in the endgame. Some Harvest crafts allow you to effectively exalt your items with specific mods. For example, exalting a physical modifier onto the item. Imagine that for leveling. Like, just imagine that for your first leveling experience. It's the opening weekend, and let's say you decided to play a melee physical character, and you are looking for an item, a weapon, that is going to carry you, let's say, through a couple of the acts of the story. and you've got a weapon that's got some decent rolls on it, but it has an open spot and doesn't have a physical modifier on that particular item. If you could go into your garden for just a moment and Exalt Slam a guaranteed physical property onto that weapon that you already kind of like, but aren't sure if it's going to carry you for a couple of acts, that is a massive power upgrade. It means you don't have to go to the trade website. It means you don't have to buy an entirely new weapon. It means that the weapon that you've already got is missing one stat, and maybe the garden has got that stat waiting for you. Normally, Exalted Orbs are very rare due to a combination of their power, tradability, and that they work on any item. If we drop too many early in the game, they'll lose a lot of their value. However, we can give a lot of physical exalts early in the game through Harvest, as they can only be used on lower level items and don't have any implications for endgame items. By endgame, the physical exalts become rarer again because their value rises exponentially as they affect more items. Harvest crafts effectively allow you to exalt your gear while leveling alongside dozens of other similar powerful outcomes, which is unprecedented in Path of Exile. How do I get Tier 2 seeds? Monsters that emerge from Tier 1 plants have a chance to drop a Tier 2 seed when slain. The same principle applies for Tier 3 and Tier 4 seeds. Do monsters from the garden also drop items? Yes. The main reward for tending your garden is powerful crafting options, but you'll also receive regular items and potentially some harvest-specific uniques. The item drop rate of monsters in the garden is higher than that of regular monsters in the main game because they're league content. What's the motivation for killing more monsters? The more monsters you kill, the more seed drops you get, and the more life force you can collect for your crafting session. Any leftover life force can be stored and used to yield higher tier plants. Slain monsters also grant experience and item drops as usual, and larger fights result in larger bonuses to item drops. We are also experimenting with creating a system that means that the more monsters you kill at a time, the more item drops and life force you get relative to the size of the harvest. This would be displayed as a list of stats below the collector's harvest button, similar to the list of stats next to the Metamorph power bar. This is absolutely brilliant. So for those of you who have been confused about what life force is and how it matters for harvest, it's essentially your crafting resource when you're inside your garden. If you have no life force, then you might have some sort of amazing craft that's available to you on the list based on the seeds and monsters that you've planted and slain, but you don't have any resources to actually use it. So think of life force as your crafting resource. It is essentially your stack of alchemy orbs, your stack of transmutes, your stack of exalts. If you have no life force, then you can't craft in there. If you do have life force, then you can continue crafting for as long as you've got options and life force. Will there be some way to know when your plants are ready to harvest without visiting your garden? We're currently working on some kind of signal within the UI that will alert you that you have a collector that's near plants that are ready to harvest. Its exact implementation is currently in progress, and we'll confirm the final details as soon as they are decided. How do I get to my garden? When you open a seed cache, Oshabi will appear from her portal. You can walk through it to access your garden or alternatively enter it from your hideout. Will my garden ever reset? No, your garden has a set size from the beginning. You'll always access the same one, but it will continue to evolve as you develop your garden. You can move infrastructure and plants around if you put them in the wrong place. Can I access my stash in the garden? Yes. You can craft items that are stored in your stash, but cannot remove or add items to the stash if you're in a map. So this avoids players like just always accessing their stash tab while they're in a map. Like essentially you wouldn't have to use portals to have an inventory space to then dump stuff in. Essentially you don't just get to pull every single item out of a map. You still need a loot filter. Can I re-enter the garden if I die? Yes, unless you're in a hardcore league, of course. The monsters will remain until the instance closes. How does it work in parties? You will be able to access your party members' gardens by entering Oshabi's portal. We are still working out the details for how seed drop allocation will work when a player opens the seed cache, as well as how that will affect an individual player's progress towards growing their plants. Am I able to access my garden from other characters? Yes. You have one garden per league that each of your characters within that league can access. However, your plants will only grow if you're opening seed caches that are from a level similar to the level of plants in your garden. For example, you can't progress your level 82 seeds while you're in the mudflats. This avoids any kind of high-level, low-level shenanigans where you would simply like reset the zone or reset the instance in order to continually progress your garden. I think that's great. Do your map mods affect the monsters in your garden? We're still working out the finer details of this, so we can't confirm or deny anything just yet. Can delirium affect the monsters in your garden? Our intention is that delirium can spread through your garden and the timer will be paused if all players in the instance are inside the grove. That's interesting. Okay, that's potentially mind-bending. Yeah. That's a big deal because that means that there's a whole bunch of monsters that we can add to Delirium. So similar to how Alva has become incredibly popular during Delirium League, it could be that if you've got Delirium influenced in a zone, then you're definitely going to want to interact with your garden. Okay, I'm just spitballing here. This is my first time reading that, and so thinking about it, so I could be way off base on this, but that almost makes me think like you'll always want to have a set number of monsters ready to go in your garden just in case you get Delirium in that particular map, because that would be a fantastic addition, right? Especially since we're going to have guaranteed cluster jewel drops at specific tiers of reward levels. So that's pretty interesting. Pay attention to that. That might be an emerging part of the meta during 3.11. When I enter Oshabi's portal, will I have to wait for a loading screen? No, it works similar to Incursion and loads instantly. Ziggity's live Q&A. Just in case you missed it, Ziggity hosted a live Q&A with lead developer Chris Wilson, the famous "Hi, I'm Chris Wilson" of Grinding Gear Games Chris Wilson fame, where they talked in more depth about what to expect from Harvest. Check it out in the video below. All right, so this entire post is down below in the video description. Go ahead and let us know what you think in the comments exactly about all of these different changes. It sounds like there's going to be a lot of very, very powerful options, especially as we're leveling. I think SSF players are going to absolutely love Harvest. I think trade players are going to love Harvest, specifically trade players who like to sell their items. If you don't want to interact with your garden at all for economic purposes, you just want to trade, that's still going to be there for you. If you're a big-time trader, though, and a big-time crafter, then Harvest is going to be an absolute delight to play. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope Harvest is the League a Mirror of Galandra drops for you.
Thanks for watching that video. If you'd like more information on any of our discussion points today, you can see them down below in the video description. If you'd also like to join our Discord or support our Patreon, you can do so with the links down below. Thanks again, and big shout out to all of our Patreon supporters.